My children have known about Jesus' whole life for their whole life. For the simple reason that they asked. It was easy for me, I found, to share the stories of Jesus healing people, of Jesus going to the lost people in the community and knitting them back into the heart of their community. Everybody wants to be close to Jesus at those moments. That's the story we just heard. It's the waving of the palms, and it's the celebration of the one who comes in the name of the Lord. But that alone was not his whole life. I don't remember if my kids asked about Jesus' death specifically, or if it was that they first asked about the death and the sin, the brokenness that's in the world, and that telling those stories brought us back around to Jesus' death. But I do remember understanding that my 3-year-old, my 4-year-old child was already discovering the presence of death. I'm already needing God's love. Seeing an animal that's dead on the side of the road. This has been hit by the way we choose to live with cars, right? I mean, these are like the earliest deaths that people discover death in the world. When a child kills an insect, kills something from fear. The sickness of a friend, the chronic sickness of a friend, the death of a fellow member of the church, the death of my father, the loss of pandemic, ecological devastation, bullying. I guess I'm a little surprised to find that my children knew each of those firsthand, without my help and beyond my ability to protect them. And I live on a quiet street in Katuka that has a sidewalk and town water and a swing set out back and a gentle lawn. Never mind that secondhand they knew about, in biblical terms, wars and rumors of war. And as I say, they asked, why did that happen? Who did that? Whatever happened to you? Whatever happened to you? So as a parent, I became thankful in a whole new way for Jesus giving his entire life as an example to us. Thankful on behalf of my children and God's response to them about evil, about death. When they asked me about Jesus' crucifixion, why? I had to find answers quickly and in language that was honest and simple. It didn't take too much time. Saying the real point. Why did they kill Jesus? Well, people were afraid of his love. They didn't want to share the way that Jesus was teaching us to share. They didn't want the world to change into God's dream because they didn't want to change the way they lived. And when they asked me about war and death and climate destruction, I became able to say, remember why they killed Jesus? Actually, the same reason. And my kids remember the reasons why people killed Jesus, and they could relate them back to me, and then we could make those connections. My children know from Jesus that their fear of death in the world are something that God knows about, and that God has done something about. And of course, the secret, my thankfulness for God's help in teaching my children is also my thankfulness for God's help. We adults deserve to be bashful if we are pretending that our fears are more common. Accusing others out of our fear
ecological devastation, bullying, death of our beloveds. I sit with you day by day as we ask, these things happen to me. What happened to you? Will it ever happen to me is asked in the sense of, will I ever be that lost? And it's also asked in the sense of, am I part of this? Am I perpetrating? If we understand, I think, that the more complex answers that we make to these questions, they're often an adult version of a half answer. Strangely, or maybe it's not strange, maybe it's for the sake of our own, for the sake of continuing our own complicity, we learn as we grow up often to accept a half answer instead of learning to keep trusting God's simple answers. God's response to all sin and death is clear. God's response is complete. God's response is Jesus' whole life. During Jesus' passion, some of his responses were to getting safety by way of violence. He said, put up your sword. Wants the spiritual immaturity that would rather kill others than grow up oneself. He said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. When his own family was being broken by his own death, he said, Father, here in my beloved friend is your new son, so that you will not be alone. And friend, here is your mother. I adopt you to each other. And at the seeming moment of the seeming finality of his own death, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. All of this just done in the most relatable human terms. Not, well, as a friend of mine says, self-giving of Christ in crucifixion is a loving action accomplished in the most fundamentally relatable way. And by that, it consumes entire world that we would fabricate for ourselves. The world of victory by violence, the world of ethnic purity, deference to wealth, the worship of human willpower, religious nationalism, victim shaming, complex theology and philosophy, all consumed in the crucifixion. And children's demand for clear, complete answers, and their inability, their physical inability to accept a half answer, they keep our focus upon the simple actions of Jesus, rather than complex ways of looking away. Scripture does not display a God who wanted Jesus to die as he did, but it shows a God who wanted those false worlds to burn. And in Jesus, he was willing to pass through the cross to accomplish that. God gave us the response of Jesus' whole life because we asked. So now we go with Jesus the whole way, the way of the cross, so that all of our false worlds burn for us as well. So that if we should be offered scorn of the poor, if we should be offered victory through violence, that they should look and taste to us like ash. They already burned to us. They will not satisfy. Only for us, when we go the way of the cross, will God's real dream satisfy us. He accepted the way of the cross that we might know the way of salvation. So today we accept this way too, and tell his whole life for ourselves, for our children, for the world, and for the love of God.